Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room TVs. My name's Luke and I am the Pervasive Media Studio producer. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to any of you out there watching who are new to the studio, for whom this might be the first time you're engaging with us. For those of you, here's a little bit more about what we do. The studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology from everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, University of West England and University of Bristol. And we're a home for early stage ideas, companies and creatives and a meeting place of both the creative and commercial industries. It's a studio space offering desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities all for free. And it's ultimately a safe place for artists, businesses and companies to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. For this week's talk, we welcome Vincent Baidoo, who is a studio resident and Southwest Creative Technology Immersion Fellow amongst a heap of other esteemed titles. Vincent will be talking us through his recent personal programming journey that ended with him accidentally becoming a think tank creator. Quick content warning, there is one slide featuring some censored nudity in the talk. So keep an eye out for that if you want to avert any eyes at any point for that one. There will be a Q&A at the end, as there is every week, with this talk running at roughly 35 minutes. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them into the chat window and I'll pick them out as we go, or you can tweet your questions to @PMStudioUK. A captioned and recorded version of the talk will be available here after the talk is finished. Before we get started, next week's talk is a talk that we had scheduled a while back, but for various reasons had to be cancelled, and we're really pleased it's back. It's called Meet Me on the Other Side. From the uncanny valley to life as a stick of butter, studio resident and former studio producer Verity McIntosh will share some of the good, the bad, and the downright ridiculous from her recent adventures in social VR. Verity is a senior lecturer at the University of the West England, and where she runs the pioneering MA Virtual and Extended Realities course, one of the first of its kind. The course is an industry-led, practice-based course exploring the politics, business, and culture of immersive technologies. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PMStudioUK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to the newsletter on our website. Don't forget, while you're watching me talk, hit subscribe and like on this YouTube video and channel. And the more subscribers we get and the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share the link now on any of your socials and share it with your followers. For now, I'm going to hand over to Vincent.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come and view this talk. Like was explained, I am a Pervasive Media resident. I'm an Immersion Fellow for the Southwest Creative Technology Network. And at the moment, the term that I'm using to just describe myself as quickly as possible is a transmedial technologist. So I'm generally interested in storytelling and all forms of technological advances. Now, to move on to my first slide here, I just need to say, for like all the legal reasons, that the logos that you see on the bottom here aren't direct associates of the think tank. It's only just been created and therefore can't establish those sorts of relationships yet. But these are all people that I've either collaborated with, worked for, or had grants from. So all of those bits will be highlighted specifically throughout the talk, but just want to highlight the BBC, the Arts Council, and the Southwest Creative Technology Network, as this talk will be basically an official delivery for two of the projects that are involved with them. So just to move straight into it, my personal journey with coding, with technology, it started with trying to make a game without knowing how to code. And I had a talk, my first talk with the Watershed about that. So even though it wasn't recorded, I'm not going to go into all of that, but I will say that the aim for me at that point was to make this game, and I make plans in kind of sets of 5 years. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make this game. When I release the game, hopefully 5 years from that point, I'll be at a place within technology around certain people. And even though the game is still not finished yet, which I do plan to finish this year, the beauty of it is that everything that I could have dreamed of ended up happening anyway alongside of it. So that's what this journey is. So at the point at which I kind of set the liminal between where I couldn't code and where it started was still within Kachina's legacy. And I got a Microfund when I became a Pervasive Media resident. And between me actually going and becoming the resident and hearing the news that I became it set a certain mindset in my head where I was trying to be a little bit more adventurous. And this particular thing here, so this Kachina's legacy, is when I started diving into JavaScript. And the problem I was trying to solve is, essentially, I started playing Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game. They had a temperature mechanic on there, and I wanted to implement a temperature mechanic myself. And just by working through the logistics in my mind, there was a particular set of 3 days where at the beginning, I was staring at code that I didn't really understand. And as I was trying to pretty much trial and error my way through the whole set of code, I was able to develop exactly what I wanted. So on the left, you see where it's underneath where it says egg, I essentially added my own extra colors, which was a highlight. And on the right, you can see the code where it actually figures out whether you're the correct temperature, whether you're too hot or you're too cold. So that's one of the milestones where I would say I went from kind of following the presets that come with the program and actually getting into the nitty-gritty of the core coding. So from that point, when I actually got in and I was a resident and I was being given this time, I wanted to explore other areas. Kachina's legacy was being developed on a program which was made so that all types of like knowledge bases could interact with it. But I wanted to do something that was purely code. So the first thing that I did was an Instagram bot, which essentially it logs in for you and likes stuff for you. So it's pretty dangerous to do it on your own, but I wasn't doing it for the likes. I kind of kept it to a minimum. I just wanted to see if it would work. So I started interacting with Python and the shell language. And basically from this, what it kind of taught me was the importance of being able to follow instructions when you don't know. Just a lot of mistakes that you end up making and a lot of reasons why people in the forums end up getting kind of pretty angry at you is because you didn't actually follow the instructions in the first place. So there wasn't a lot of creativity in this one, but I had a working bot, and you know, the fact that I could customize it enough that it was okay, look up grime hashtag and like some photos, it was pretty satisfying, and I counted that as a little complete project. So the next thing that I developed after that was an analysis bot. So this was a bot that scours over Twitter. You can put in key terms. It correlates like a certain amount of tweets and then tells you whether the phrases or the terms that you're looking for are being seen in good light or bad light. So this was interesting for me because similar to the other one, it was a lot of just following instructions, but it's the first thing that got me thinking about how a lot of what is going on is interpretation, and that actually to develop different types of things that have different intentions, that come from different communities and will have different appeals. It's not always just about the technical side of it. The technical side's pretty basic. And once I had that, it was opening me up to, okay, so if this analysis bot is going around and it's looking up these terms and it's making these correlations, how is it accounting for slang? Does this bot know how slang works? Does it know how languages are developed colloquially? I was pretty sure that it wasn't. So that's the first thing that kind of got me on the side of, my mindset outside of coding is like instantly applicable once you get these kind of standardized knowledge bases like under wraps, once you can make it physically do what you want. And it kind of got me understanding a little bit more about the APIs, because the way that the bot was doing the analysis involved going to a previous API and then getting the information. So at that point I was realizing, oh, okay, even though I've got this code here, there's a lot of other stuff going on in the back end, and I was just gaining more confidence that if I was able to see that back end, I'd probably be able to understand it to some degree. So the next thing I wanted to do was make a bot completely from scratch. What was interesting about this for me at this point, I got familiar enough between JavaScript and Python that I was like, oh, I can actually make the decision. I was kind of, you know, I was getting familiar with these tools to a level where I was being able to make like customized decisions purely based on the nuances which I wanted to achieve. So Crown Root Arena is essentially a game made for Discord that happens through a bot that involves all of the characters that are in my Transmedial company. And the game kind of, it it works in terms of text coming up onto a screen, but then you get DM'd more information that you can access. And the aim was to make the most tactical gaming bot on Discord. That project started getting so large because what I wanted to do was achievable, that I decided that I needed to finish Kachina before I finished that. But I was able to take a chunk of the code and separate it and just make the Crown Root bot. So what the Crown Root bot does is it's our bot for our Discord, and people are able to make customized profiles. There's an experience system on there. There's an alpha system, which is going to come into play when the gaming bots are in there. There's a way that people can share gifts, hugs, high fives, and show each other support. And there's also a customized way that people can share their comics that they've published on our website with restrictions to levels, so that you can only send a certain amount of comics to people who are in the Discord, people who are outside of the Discord. So it's just a way of kind of guiding what happens on our Discord in an automated way. And again, because the functionality was there, it was a very satisfying, completed project, which is still operational until now. So then I became an Immersions Fellow for the Southwest Creative Technology Network, and I was researching what I called virtual marginalization. That talk is available online, so I won't go into that. But as part of that, I was able to apply for a prototype, and I didn't get that prototype, but what I was given was a development fund to enhance my studio for VR development. So that was getting a new computer and a VR setup. So just to kind of say this officially, all of the projects that you'll be seeing from now, I am happy to go down as official outcomes as that development fund, because it's the power of the new computer and me deciding to go to PC over Mac because of the development advantages. And this was all achievable because of that computer that I made, which was this one here. So this was another interesting step for me because it was a step into the hardware aspect of things. By this point, I was very comfortable in the way that I was learning things. And in the bottom left, you'll see my Mac, and it actually had a graphics card problem, which ended up being solved by me taking the graphics card and putting it in the oven in a certain direction at a certain time. I'd heard about it for a while, so whilst it was breaking, I wasn't too sure. I tried it and it worked. So this was the thing that kind of really gave me the confidence in being able to decipher information on the internet about essentially just expensive and pricey hardware. So on the right, you'll see the build that I made, and on the left, you'll see all the individual items that I used to construct my build. So I did a VR test. I had a Nintendo VR. I had a Oculus Rift. No, I got a Vive Pro. I got a Vive Pro. I forget, because to be honest, I don't use it that much. It was literally once I got it functioning, I was happy. You know, you're going to have to trust me that the test on the right is actually a VR test. Effectively, you can pick up the circle, you can pick up the cube. They've got slightly different physics, and you can walk around in them. I'm much more interested in VR as a tool for creating other things than they are for the experiences themselves. But by being able to say that I can create VR, this was another confidence boost in terms of just being able to internalize and communicate what my capabilities were as a programmer within like the immersive space, the gaming space, the storytelling space, and all those other things. So it was very pivotal. But to be fair, it was pretty short-lived. Now the good stuff. Now, in the time when I was basically trying to get the ins and outs of the development fund kind of like written and legalized, it kind of came to me, you know, I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point? And I was like, I want to make games for Nintendo. That was like the aim. That was like one of my 5-year goals. I would release Kachina, and then by 5 years' time, I would do it. And just something inspired me to go like, hey, why don't you just contact Nintendo now? Now, weirdly enough, when I went to contact them and found all the emails, when I got to the space, it's like there was a verification waiting for me. So I can't remember when, but clearly at some other point in my life, I tried this as well and kind of got halfway. I spoke to Nintendo, literally gave them my life story, and they were happy to accept me as a developer. So here on the left, you'll see my very early builds, and on the right, some of the games that are being developed for Nintendo. So this is console development and brought me into the world of C# and just that kind of slightly, I don't know what they call, like higher tier programming, you know, Python and JavaScript. I love them, and people say that they're good entries. But by the time I now got to C#, I was able to appreciate the advantages that come with coding in C#, not just have it overwhelm me. It was kind of things that I was like, oh yeah, it makes that easier, or that annoying thing that always happens in JavaScript. So yeah, the Nintendo development is probably one of the happiest things that have happened to me in my life, to be honest. One of the goals that I've wanted since I was about 6 years old. So the Bristol Southwest Network is a network in Bristol that is kind of aimed towards entrepreneurship in the Southwest. And I was invited to be on a panel at one of their discussions where they were overlooking some research that they were doing. Now, at the time, I didn't know their technological aims. It was just in the panel, there was something that was very glaring to me that wasn't brought up. And that was basically in their research, which you can see in the top right. It was highlighted, these are the sectors that BME people were in Bristol. And as you can see, it was very, very high in retail and very, very low in technology. And for me, that was just a glaring problem that wasn't being spoke about. Obviously, being here now in the present of 2020, the hindsight is clear. But at the time, what that did is that basically that caught the eye of the people who had founded it. And for the next year, I became the head of technology for the Bristol Southwest Network. So that, that amongst other things, like being a resident of Pervasive Media Studio and just kind of how everything ends up linking up in Bristol, allowed me to get invited to a lot of different things that were happening around Bristol. So I was invited to kind of government level discussions and workshop about AI and data that was happening. I was still going to these the physical versions of these lunchtime talks, seeing what other fellows and just other members and other residents we were getting up to on a creative level. I was involved in kind of future facing aims of Bristol as it relates to where they want to position themselves within technology. And I was also just keeping up with all of the previous commitments that I've been making up until that point, which was very much on a consulting level, rather than me kind of putting myself forward to say, hey, I can actually like create these projects. I just felt very comfortable to be able to speak on the matter, which was coming from a largely kind of social awareness and kind of entrepreneurial mindset that was being sprinkled with this kind of newfound confidence within speaking the different languages that are needed to be able to understand technology. So by going to all these different talks, what it just kind of made me realize is, as I was speaking to people who were more and more embedded and hands-on in the realms of technology, it was just like, no matter what they spoke about, like it just it wasn't able to go over my head. I think that, you know, the reason why I think this is that technology has got so advanced that technology now keeps seeping into other things. So high level technology ends up getting into spiritual conversations, or like social conversations, or mental health issues. And so it kind of pulls into all of these other things, which I'm very familiar in. And so whereas, say, you know, somebody who's maybe learned to do websites, when they then go into AI, it starts, I don't know, there's a lot of it kind of you can't teach old dog new tricks kind of realm. Whereas I think a lot of younger people, or again, in my case, people who didn't have the original restrictions or patterns that went with old ways of coding that were just coming in new, standing on the shoulders of giants, everything was understandable to me. So at that point, I started specifically saying, okay, what's the most complicated thing that I can try and attack? So that's what this next set is. So the first thing I tried was doing the face swap thing. So you'd seen some apps that's got really popular recently. I wouldn't advise using those apps unless you're purposely trying to put your face into some kind of like embedded data set where they can say that they're creating random faces and your phenotypes are part of that. But outside of that, it's a lot of fun. had a lot of fun creating it. Now, this example here may not look much to you, and it isn't really. For those who know about anime, this is from Demon Slayer. And what I did is I took a face set of Goku and I tried to put it over the top. Now, the face set that I used was ridiculously small. It was about 50, 60 images, and it was from Goku at all different power levels. So if people know about anime, that's like base level, Super Saiyan. So like he looks completely different in all of them. So it was a ridiculous thing, but I just wanted to see if I could make it work. And this is the best frame from it. So for those who know, you can see that slightly more Dragon Ball Z type of features on the face of the main protagonist of Demon Slayer. So I did that. I seen that I could physically make it work, and I kind of left that as me now understanding how the actual algorithms work and the face tracing and how it maps out your face and what that's going to then mean in terms of cameras, that instinctive. I mean, we see it on everything now. Like I said, the apps are there, your phone knows where faces are. So it just gave me that understanding. I'm very interested in how AI will affect the animation industry. So the next thing, I've just got to shout out this guy very specifically. On Udemy, there was a course, Ethical Hacking from Scratch. I was at a talk with some cybersecurity people. And again, I just named, wait a minute, okay, cybersecurity seems like the most complicated thing. And I seem to understand all of it. And you know, when you go onto Udemy and it kind of realizes you haven't been there in a while, they're like, hey, you can have any of these courses for £10. And I got this course for £10, and it definitely would have been worth the 200-300 quid. It's so packly dense. I mean, if you look in the top right, you'll see my progress. I'm not even halfway through. There's so much that happens in every lesson. I was just getting tired, but I was learning so much. So as you can see here, it was the thing that made me get comfortable with Linux. That was one of the biggest things and the biggest steps and the biggest hurdles it made me overcome. Making my build kind of got me re-familiar with PC over Mac. You know, Mac's, everything's very, like it's already got its preferences there. Windows a little bit more customizable. Obviously, Linux is like the ultimate for that. It just helped me so much with that. But also, it just gave me so many individual principles of cybersecurity. Kind of did the thing that I like to do. I kind of put one and one together, came up with 4, and I was like, okay, if I use this principle, this principle, this principle, I was able to go back onto Udemy and basically make it think that I just come fresh. So now I can get £10 courses whenever I want, which I consider ethical hacking, because the algorithm, that's to play between the algorithms, them using it to kind of manipulate and feed your dopamine and catch you at certain points. I think it's fair enough for you to reverse their algorithm on them, So I was like, okay, I've learned a lot. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to buy another course for a £10. So I got a neural network course, and again, it was like an amazing thing. Now, even before I started coding, I was very interested in AI just from the kind of futuristic principles of it. So I did already know how a neural network works, and the correlation between the brain and the non-correlation is between our actual brain, and actually how artificial intelligence isn't really intelligent at all, but it's got its features there. So the original concept that the lessons taught was about basically credit scores. So you got this big data set, and then it was able to predict whether you should give somebody a loan or not. And so because I was trying to make sure that I actually understood it, I wanted to create something from scratch that you wouldn't be able to research online to find and how to build it. And what I came up with is I created an artificial intelligence that predicts the lottery numbers based on astronomical data. So essentially, it's like using astrology and the principles of geolocation and where the planets are to say, okay, this lottery was done here. This is where the planets were in relation to it. And then basically you could then put a location and a time, and it would say, these are the numbers that are most likely to come up. So in that, what I learned was about crawling. So the lottery numbers, I had to develop a program that would go on there. I think it's like there was about 2,300 different numbers. So it would go on, it would take the numbers, it would give the date, and it would put it into a nice data set, which I then put into the training. I was using TensorFlow to be able to do that. I learned practically about the training aspects of it, but also just the practical matters of when you're getting data, because interestingly enough, the lottery doesn't know where all of the things were taken from. So that was just like another thing of seeing the practical things about when it actually comes to building these AIs and the gaps in datas and the kind of unknowns literally that you now have to build around. Now, if you're wondering if it worked, obviously I did try it. But because I don't play the lottery, I found out after I bought the ticket that I programmed mine. I think I programmed mine to do 5 numbers. I programmed mine to do 0 to 49, and the last national lottery goes from 0 to 59. So technically that means that maybe it would work, but I don't really care about that. Next thing I did, bought another course. It was about blockchain again. It was something that I'd already been researching anyway. It's been in my, I love the dark web and all things kind of like crypto. So I was like, okay, I want to develop my own cryptocurrency. I got it, to be fair, with this course, I was a little bit underwhelmed by the end, just because it was just creating something that was built on Ethereum. I didn't really appreciate that at the time. I think it's actually really cool now, but because it wasn't actually making the crypto from scratch, but what I did do is give me a complete understanding of the actual algorithm that Bitcoin uses. So this was like my quick little alternative blockchain. And just for those, like this little bit here, this create block, that's the kind of bit that you really want to understand, just in terms of knowing where the security comes from, but where also all the disadvantages come from for Bitcoin, which all the other cryptos are trying to kind of shape themselves around. So with all of that, basically what I ended up doing is having a conversation with the head of cybersecurity at Bristol University, and I was in a panel giving them some feedback about some stuff that they were going to do. He heard that I did game design. He had this website which was aiming to be the what they're calling the cybersecurity body of knowledge. So it's trying to standardize what you need to know to get into cybersecurity. And he wanted to do a game, and basically I convinced him to do a transmedial project. So this was me doing 6 comics and 2 games to basically convert this website with really dense cybersecurity information and turn it into a transmedial world. So we built the world, made the comics, made the games. So this was really, really nice for me, because my personal aims with technology: 1, I just like information; 2, I just like experimenting; but 3, it's about me being able to bring my worlds to life. I kind of like akin my journey at this particular time to when Walt Disney was like building trains, and everyone was like, why are you building trains? And then he made Disney World. And obviously it was about his intrinsic knowledge of architecture that meant that he knew the business models, and nobody could kind of be the middleman and just say, oh, you want to build that will cost £1 trillion. You could actually do it himself. So this is what I feel like I'm doing with technology now, is because I'm learning every little bit of it, I can have an idea and say, okay, I'm going to put this world in there. And so this now, the last project I did was for Mechamon, designing their story world, a story world for that. I was very, very early stages. So it was really nice to have my knowledge on technology bring me back to actually being able to make Transmedial again. So then I was taken to Canada to go to the 360 Dome Symposium. So this is a piece of technology and an experience where you go into a dome and you project stuff. One, I just liked it because I always said to my friends who DJ and stuff, like when it starts taking you around the world, you got to kind of show love and appreciation for that. So whereas a lot of these meetings were kind of like around Bristol in the Southwest, to be taken to Canada for a week was nice. But also it made me realize, going out there and seeing the projects, I was like, there are so many people I know from ends, so many people I know who were in more entertainment fields who would have made way more exciting projects than what I was seeing, based on the technology and based on different people's knowledge of it. Like there was some kind of basic stuff being put out there, as well as some pretty good things. But that was when I was really like, I really wanted to start bringing some people into this world. Then we saw this thing, and this was the warning. So this was basically a very problematic piece that was out in the symposium, which basically had you in a dome, had you surrounded by these giant black people who were, because of the algorithm that they were using, looked like Neanderthals, and it was just kind of dumb. and had no reason as to why it was black people, and had no black people involved in their team. So, and everyone was kind of like, how did this not get screened through? So this is one of those, again, those kind of feeding into, we need to be in these spaces in every single level, but that includes in the creation of this, because literally a black person could have made something that had nothing to do with being black, and it just would have been better than this. So yeah, that was one of the big takeaways, was that like, oh, okay, I'm getting pretty good at technology now, but even people that I know who are not good at technology can be in these spaces based on their creativity to make things that are better than this. But this also fed into my previous research with virtual marginalization, where the conclusion that I came to was about what was happening with Fortnite and how black bodies were going to be used in virtual realities, and that they weren't going to be compensated properly, that we were just going to have our identity stripped of us, placed in the virtual world, and that non-black people were going to be able to like financially benefit off it, you know, in the trillions, like it's basically happening with Epic. So after that, I got an opportunity to apply to get a grant from the BBC and the Arts Council. And my initial application was to make an alternative Dome project where I would be using CGI, and I would be getting dancers from a black dance group, and I'd have black people involved. And essentially we would just own our own virtual identities. So that was the motion capturing. Very useful. Again, based on what I had researched beforehand with virtual marginalization, I just really wanted to understand the technology myself, and it was so instantly gratifying. But basically the Dome, I still think it isn't created now. COVID wouldn't have helped, but it already had delays from beforehand. So very quickly, I had to make a U-turn within that project. So I just decided to myself, all right, I went to Japan a few years ago. I wanted to make a really futuristic arcade machine to showcase all my stories and my games. So I was just like, okay, if I'm not going to do the Dome, I want to do the most futuristic thing that I can. So there's actually a company that is based in Bristol. Ultra Haptics bought Leap Motion and created the company, which is Ultra Leap, and they create these haptics, which is basically, it gives you ultrasonic haptics, which gives you feelings without actually touching you physically. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take that. Then there is the hologram, so which comes from Looking Glass. So basically what this is if you imagine, when people think about a hologram, it's like they're able to walk around an illusionary piece of light, which they can see from all degrees. What normally happens now when you look at something is it's actually maybe 3 or 4 different faces angled in a certain way where you go around and you can look at it, but it's actually only 4 faces. Now, what the Looking Glass does is you look at it face on, but it's actually giving you 45 degrees and 45 different images. So it means you can actually look around. And it is very satisfying to see it in real life. So I wanted to combine these 2 things to make a prototype for an arcade machine, and this is what it currently looks like. So in the middle, you'll see the kind of final product. On the right, I spoke to a guy, and he basically makes kind of like all these organic kind of bespoke looking shapes. He liked my idea about a futuristic arcade machine, and so said that he wanted to construct something for it. And so this is kind of what I've ended up with. And I've basically created an experience which kind of takes you through the haptics and the hologram with a bit of narrative that goes in there. I'm not gonna lie, I basically broke the haptics about 10 minutes before the stream started. It should be fixable. It's to do with the power supply, a little bit of soldering. So the plan is that after today, I'm going to be filming with the representatives of the BBC and the Arts Council for the delivery of that product. And I was going to say to anybody who wanted to come over to the studio tomorrow, they could also test it. This should still be the case, but I've got to fix it. So hopefully this is going to be another little notch in my hero's journey to show that I know how to solder. But yeah, it's there. And it's the first time that I've kind of put bits of hardware together on a technological level. So when I built my computer, that was the first time that I'd kind of really built something from scratch. But obviously I was doing something that had been done before. Now this, it's kind of like me doing the problem solving of putting these two bits of high tech kind of technology together. Because one of the things that I didn't mention before about doing the Nintendo thing, one of the biggest learning curves that I had with that is the fact that because everything's behind non-disclosure, there's no information on the internet. You can't just YouTube, how do you get your development software working? How do you do this? You have to figure everything out yourself. And that basically forces you to learn to read the documentation properly. Similar thing with these, because these are kind of newer products on the market, there's not a million YouTube videos, if any, about how to operate them, and especially not how to combine them together. So that was a very satisfying bit of the journey to be able to kind of get to that. So in terms of the thoughts about connecting that journey and an actual Black think tank, this is kind of like where my mind was at, kind of going through that and why it's ended up formulating into this. So the first is about research and commentary, just one for one. Doing the research has been fun, and the research always goes under institutions. So if there isn't an institution that has the specific aim of collating information with this specific perspective, it's also always going to go under other institutions. I really want to continue collaborating with all the institutions that I have done beforehand and any more that come up. But I also want to now create institutions that can also facilitate this sort of collaboration, but also commentary on things that end up coming up. As an example, I had my scooter taken, I got an electronic scooter, and I had it taken by a police officer who gave me a slip saying, if you don't get insurance for the scooter in 7 days, you can't get it back. You can't get insurance for a scooter, which means that that's basically them saying that they're going to destroy it. Now, this is an interesting conversation as it relates to technology, because I've spoken to 8 police officers since then, and they have all told me on record that it's a gray area. So as we get these new bits of technologies, and we get these gray areas, we need to be able to have substantial commentary and analysis about what's actually happening as these technologies get more and more groundbreaking. So the second bit is about consulting and training. Now, again, this morning, I got the final conversation about this electronic scooter situation, and the result is that he's going to give me my scooter back if I go and do an hour consulting with him, because the conversation that I've had with him was so useful for him. So I've agreed to do that, but ultimately, there's all types of consulting that is going to happen within these technologies, because as any technology gets mass adopted, no matter what small marginal community is creating them, they're going to want to go out and they're going to want to consult with other communities about it. But when those people go into that, they're going to also need training to go alongside of it, to basically upskill people so that they're going to be able to speak that language. And this was a conversation that I was happening whilst getting my development fund as well. So there was a very brilliant idea which was put forward about to try and get more Black people involved in the research and prototyping phase of some of these grants and availabilities. The idea was to try and upskill people so that they could at least be on the panel, so that they could help influence the decisions. And I recently was on the panel for the data aspect of the Southwest Creative Technologies prototype section, and it was really good. And again, I think it's a really, really good idea, but I also think that if these people are getting trained to become consultants, but then there's no institution for them to sit in, then after those things happened, they kind of just get left to the wind and are only useful when other communities want them, rather than, again, like I'm saying, being able to facilitate a kind of cycle of influence and collaboration. So grants and permission. So like I said at the beginning, one of the most interesting things that I found on my personal journey is how my mind unlocked when I was given what I was considered permission. And I'm kind of a very anti-authority person, but I can't deny the fact that when other people in these places said, oh yeah, your ideas are good enough to get a grant, your ideas are good enough for us to pay to like give you a chance to think, it just gave me more confidence in my mind, which made me do more, which made me get more hands-on. So by creating a think tank that gives out grants, but also gives out permission, it's basically going to hopefully influence people in that exact same way for actually work that they will then go and do in their own time. and we'll see in a second. And the last is just the innovation and networking. So it's just a case of, just like when I showed in that research, which showed everybody in being so heavily in retail and not technology, and I was saying this looks dangerous, we're here now, it's COVID. This talk might as well have been called Why I'm Not Completely Screwed Because of COVID. Because basically, me making a technological shift 4 years ago means that this now for me, it's been like for me individually, at least on a financial level, it's been great for me, because obviously not only is there still the technological opportunities, it's only laid the road in front of us to be more technological. Now, I know a lot of people have had problems with the current advertising that's been put out to the government about people reskilling themselves. Though I don't want to go into that specifically, what I will say is, I know, especially when I start thinking about like youths who are on road, who are maybe getting into different types of trouble, I know 1 in X amount of them is not only built to be in this world, but would thrive and enjoy getting hands-on within that. So the more of those people, because that's the point, it's not for everyone. It's not to try and force people to be weird coding like automatons, but it's also is for a certain percentage of every single community. So I think that by having our foot in and allowing ourselves to network between the people who are actually hands-on, not just the people who were saying to everybody else they should get into technology, but then make it look difficult because they don't do it themselves, that networking will breed innovation, and that innovation is going to breed the actual future-proofing that we need. So where I am with the think tank at the moment, I've made 2, I'm going to say are median steps forwards. So I've given away 1 grant, and that is to Laura Knight, who's basically looking into a blockchain technology, which is going to give Black people the chance to commercialize what ends up getting lost on the internet. So like one of the examples is kind of like how a Black person might make a dance that goes viral, but only when the already established viral people do the dance, they get the money, whether that be musical artists or, social influencers. So it's going to be using kind of, she's going to be researching different algorithms and different peer-to-peer systems where the commercial benefits could be held by the people who create those kind of artistic endeavors. And I can say one of the most interesting things about it was exactly what I was saying about permission. Because of COVID, it took a few months for me to actually get to the point where I gave her the grant. But the research that I seen from when I said I'm going to give it to you to actually getting it, there was so much that was there. So it was kind of showing me, yes, this is going to work in this way, that actually it's going to be a lot about what people just end up doing on their own time. And then also I've got Cleona Kelly, who is a neuroscientist out of Birmingham. And I've basically got her to do the first paper that's going to be coming out on the think tank. And she so eloquently called it Coding Diversity into Technology. So it's a really nice yet broad look at just an academic view on why it's so important. And I like it because she keeps it academic, but at the same time, it goes into some pretty deep areas like, genome-based technologies and just like the real kind of possibilities of where these technologies can go from someone who's actually into, the brain's connection to cybernetics and those kind of things. So that is going to be coming out as soon as the website's out. So all the websites were meant to be done by today, but they're not because certain things have happened. So this is the timeline, and effectively it's just going to be each week from today. So at the moment, you can just kind of get at me on the social media platforms at South Blessed. On a week from today, I'm going to be releasing my personal website, which is effectively going to be kind of like this talk plus some of my previous ones to kind of give my transmedial history in one place, just so that when people say, oh, what do? I can point them into one place. A week after that, I'm going to be releasing my technological project website. So that's basically going to be the projects that you've seen in this talk, plus the extra ones that I'm working on at the moment, but with videos to go with it and just like some more hands-on stuff. And then a week after that, I'll be releasing the Think Tank website. So that's where you'll be able to see the introductory video with Lorraine Knight. You'll be able to read the paper from Cleona Kelly and all the other things that are being put forward. So that was my personal coding journey. I hope that it's inspired some people, either specifically, broadly. And I just really appreciate everybody who is here now and who is here in the future on the pre-record for taking the time to listen. And I hope that you will continue to follow as the journey progresses. So thank you.
Vincent, thank you. Phew, wow. When I read the copy for the talk and I saw all of the different things that were going to be covered, I was like, there's no way he can pack all of that into a 40-minute talk. But you did it. And we've got some questions in the chat already for you. So kicking off is always a really good one to start off with is, what advice would you have for someone starting out now in tech with the same dreams that you had when you first came in, when you began your journey?
I think the most important thing that I learned is to not try and learn the thing that you think is popular or that will make money or that will impress people, is to literally try and learn to create the thing that you consume the most. Don't even necessarily, I mean, okay, either try and learn how to build the very basic aspect of either the thing that you consume the most or the thing that you're most passionate about. So I've kind of looked into technology the whole of my life, but I've realized when I started developing the game with Kachina's Legacy, it's that I'd been trying to learn to build websites because in my mind, that was just the thing that you do. You start learning how to code through building websites. And because I've got no passion for websites, it always seems so hard. Now, when I look back on it, the concepts that were being taught in terms of building websites, those were the correct ones that you're meant to learn at the beginning. They just didn't sit and they just drained me. But when I got into game design, even though it skipped a few steps and was way more complicated, it was so much more digestible because the small wins were big wins. So, oh, I've learned how to shoot one gun in a game. That's fun. Whereas, oh, I've changed the color on a font. They might be equal, but this one wasn't appealing to me. So I would say either start with what you consume the most and make the very basic aspect of it, or just try and learn what you're most passionate about. So broadly speaking, think websites, apps, or games.
Right. I think it's really good advice to follow the thing that speaks to you like most. Ian Forster asks, says, love this talk. What's your thoughts on STEM versus STEAM?
I mean, again, I think that if it's coming from people stepping inside of it, I would go into like where the passions are, like where your actual passion is. So for me, like, I like maths. I've always liked maths. I just haven't really had much of a way to apply it up until now. So like, I feel like I'd be kind of cool either way, but I think that obviously they're both, again, like with this whole COVID thing, they're both going to be, they both have futures. So whichever one actually appeals to you the most is going to be the one that you're going to thrive most in, because they're both kind of pretty deep fields as well. So I think that trying to go into it without a particular passion, I don't think that that's going to benefit you.
Anyone else who wants to chuck a question in? We have about 10 minutes left. There's a few questions here I'm picking up from Twitter. One of them asks, were there any weird things that happened with the Discord bot game? Anything
and anything weird? I mean, I think that basically what I learned with the Discord bot was just kind of like how these bots interact with like cloud spaces. So I had to develop like a knowledge on SQL to be able to do that. So what I would say is that like the weird things that happen with bots, that it's all about the person who programmed it. I think when people look at chatbots and they look at the way that things like, oh, this bot's talking crazy spiritual stuff about God and, you know, like simulation theory and, oh, this one's being racist. It's just literally how it's programmed. There's not a lot that's happening with the bots that it wasn't drawn towards. So mine hasn't done anything that I haven't told it to do, and it will basically never do anything that I haven't told it to do, because I won't program it to do that. But I am very interested in creating some bots that will create their own stories. And I think at that point, yeah, that kind of more interesting, quirky stuff might come up, because I'll let the reins go a little bit more loose and see where it kind of jumbles up the information and let it get into those kind of crazier zones.
But in terms of like how it was received by the players, like how much did you have to like cultivate or control that space?
I mean, basically the bot itself is a tool to try and actually kind of cultivate exactly what happens. I think that the bot was very well received. But at the moment, I think that they're kind of waiting for the gaming side of it to come in there, because there's a lot of aspects of the bot where people are building up points and those kind of things that are going to be useful when the gaming side comes in. So basically, the game that I'm making for the bot is it's a mix of battleships, poker, and kind of like RPG elements. And so at that stage, that's where I think there's going to be like that's where it's going to be very interesting to see how things work, because people will be able to play games and carry over a currency, whether it be emotional, pride-based, that can go over into different games. So at the moment, it's very much been like my community helping me kind of fix it, and it kind of being just like another one of the projects that we have that allows people to interact with our story worlds.
Okay, cool. Another question from the chat. Could VR create a new interest in web design for you?
Yes. Yeah, no, I see where that's going. I think that the idea of these kind of home environments, it is a good point, because I haven't done any of the Second Life stuff, any of the kind of places where the virtual chat rooms. And I think that, when I was younger, I used to go on like Habbo Hotel, and I remember like the intrinsic fun that was talking to other people through their created profiles, and the ability to make your space, and the ability to make money on there that could translate into real money. So, if you're considering VR websites being these kind of virtual real estates, then yes, that is very exciting for me, because thinking about it now, that's probably a very direct correlation to the Walt Disney example, that, with what I know about coding, if that became a thing, I would be able to create my Disneyland effectively in that space. So that is very interesting. And off that comment, I probably should at least go and explore some of the commercially available kind of second worlds. And I know there is some places where people are starting to buy up virtual real estate. So yeah, I will have a look into that.
Great. Another question from the chat. You mentioned tensions between closed Nintendo versus open Linux, for example, in your journey to now. But do you have any thoughts for people who are coming into the space around that kind of closed versus open?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that there are a lot of artificial barriers that are placed within the coding community, which are based around, you could say financial, but then you could probably pull it into a more like the evolutionary base for why we even have finances, which is to try and have like an advantage over someone else, or at least to kind of protect the resources that you're using to barter with. And so the communities that come with these different things are really what determines that kind of space. And so that's what I'd say it is that, when you get into these open spaces, you go into these places where people are much more willing to talk to you about your problems, and they kind of see you as like a person to like buddy with, and they want to kind of see you come up. Whereas when you get into the closed sources, so with the Nintendo, it's the most closed one, because one, like I said, with the non-disclosures, you can't find anything online if people would lose their ability to development. But then also within the forums, people don't want to help you make your game. Like if they figured out, and I think it's fair enough, like I do business, I think that's completely fair, that if somebody has figured out how to do this really sick thing on a Nintendo Switch, they want that to be unique to their game. And you know, they don't want to put it out there so that you can make a smaller game quicker, and then that novelty is gone. So that's just what I would say, is that ultimately what you're dealing with is like the etiquette, and the more closed space, the more the terminology and the way that they deal with you will be based around kind of trying to make you not understand. And the more open the space you go, the more they're actually going to be there to help you. But ultimately, this is the thing which kind of comes back to that kind of creative. The same thing happens in the creative world, that's actually part of kind of cutting your teeth on it. And that ultimately, if you don't get past the stage where you can kind of create some solutions in your mind, you should find that aspect fun as possible. So, you know, if you're kind of built for it, it will be the thing of, I know I can ask, but I really, really don't want to. And then, oh, okay, fine, let me ask. And then when you kind of go with that energy of, all right, I've tried this, and this, and it hasn't worked, that's when the love will kind of come. So I would just say, appreciate people's time, and don't get into the space where you're just literally relying on them, but also understand that when people are being rude towards you and trying to make it seem complicated, a lot of those are artificial, those barriers, and the information can be presented in a digestible way if they so please.
That's quite a good note to finish on there. Just before I do let you go though, Vincent, you mentioned something about people having the opportunity to come to your studio to try out the futuristic arcade machine. Yes. How would people get in touch with you about that if they were up for doing that?
At the moment, just hit me up on the Instagram. That'd probably be the easiest thing, or vince@southblessed.co.uk. Give me a shout. Like I said, I'm going to have to fix it after that. So just give me a shout. And quickly, if I could just get one more message in.
Yeah.
I've kind of had my head down for the last couple of weeks. And yesterday I found out that one of my comics artists actually died. He was the producer of this comic here, which was Pictures from a Lost Life, which was a comic that he created around his experience with being put into a psychiatric ward. He made this comic as well as some other fictional ones. And this actually happened last week, and I wasn't aware of it. So I just want to kind of put my condolences out to his family, and yeah, just kind of show that love, appreciate and miss you, Tom. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vince, and sorry for your loss on that one, man. But we're gonna close up now. Sorry, you've slightly thrown me a bit there.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
Yeah, really sorry for your loss, man. That's really rough. And yeah, send us a link to his stuff, and we'll get it shared on our socials as well. So I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you, Vince. You can check out Vince on @SouthBlessed. Details on that will be on the last panel of the video when we're finished. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week's talk is Meet Me on the Other Side. From the uncanny valley to life as a stick of butter, studio resident and former PM Studio producer herself, Verity McIntosh, will share some of the good, the bad, and the downright ridiculous from her recent adventures in social VR. Verity is a senior lecturer at the University of the West of England, where she runs the pioneering MA Virtual and Extended Realities course, and it's one of the first of its kind. The course is an industry-led, practice-based course exploring the politics, business, and culture of immersive technologies. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PMStudio UK, subscribing to this channel, or PM Studio UK on Twitter, or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget, before you go, hit subscribe and hit like to give the video a thumbs up. But the more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share this link if you think anyone else would find this interesting, useful, or exciting. It'll be up here, and captioned version, recorded version ready not long after we finish today. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all again here, same time next week.